U llum għandna l-Sur Roger Malveni. Kif aħna sir qabel xejn? Tajjeb x'ti preferi ngħidlek sir? Roger, tajjeb, alright. Għax is-Sur Roger Malveni kien jallimni lili żmien daqsxejn issa mhux ħażin ilu, ġifieri. Drill.
We miss you.
Thank you. Kien żmien sabiħ ħafna u meta narak bl-uniformi sir. Terġa' tqanqan li naqra memorji ta' dak iż-żminijiet minn ir-rekrutaġġ, minn il-parati, ġifieri kien vera żmien sabiħ ħafna.
Saying you can take the man away from the army, but you can never take the army away from the man.
Veru, fatt. And I agree 100%. Hija xi ħaġa apparti d-disciplina hemm xi ħaġa li l-għol nistibdillek il-karattru kompletament, ġifiri hija xi ħaġa impressjonanti. U anka l-nies li jibqgħu, per eżempju, naf min jibqa' jgħidlek staff, eżempju, jibqa' jgħidlek pali nibqa' jgħidlek ser, ġifieri hemm xi ħaġa wis sabiħa ġo fiha. Ser, l-istorja tal-AFM, minn fejn bdiet?
L-istorja tal-AFM hija xi ħaġa meraviljuża. It has a lovely history. Attualment, id-designation AFM ġiet introdotta fin-1973. Qabel in 1973, it was called Malta Land Force. And it was redesignated Armed Forces of Malta minħabba l-fatt li bejn in-1971 u 72 il-Malta Land Force akkwistat air assets u maritime assets. Allura it could no longer be considered a land force. Allura it was given the name Armed Forces of Malta, as now it had the capability to cater for maritime operations and air operations. History, I mean, il-parent regiment tal-Armed Forces of Malta huma Royal Malta Artillery. And sfortunatamente not many people in Malta know about the Royal Malta Artillery and its colourful and prestigious history. L-RMA bdiet pratikament in the 18th century, 1800, and it was a Maltese regiment in the British Army, and it spent 200 years, almost 200 years, as a Maltese regiment in the British Army. And when it got disbanded in the late 60s, 1968-69, the then Prime Minister of Malta, l-Onorevoli Borg Olivier, tella l-Ġermanja biex jindirizza il-fizzjali u l-other ranks tal-Royal Malta Artillery, as they were a bit worried after such a long-standing history as Maltese soldiers in the British Army. They were worried of what was going to happen to them after they actually get disbanded from the British Army. And they had a long-standing custom and tradition. And the Prime Minister in 1969, that's right, in Germany, promised them that the Maltese government would absorb all the officers and other ranks into the Malta Land Force. And the Royal Malta Artillery would serve the Maltese government. So, although the AFM was designated AFM in 1973, we have the customs and traditions of the Royal Malta Artillery. And if you look at the history of the Royal Malta Artillery, they have a unique and prestigious position where campaigns are concerned. I mean, some campaigns go back to the 1801 in Elba. Okay. Where they fought side by side with their British counterparts. Egypt, 1882, 1916, 1919, 1940, 1943. So we absorbed their customs and traditions, and in fact, if I may say, Glenn, the Armed Forces of Malta is a very strange and unique creature in the international military community. Why? Because we have a land component, an air component, and a maritime component. But we have the traditions of an artillery regiment. So let's take, for example, in Maritime Squadron, blue uniform,
Cool.
they wear the beret, and on their beret they have a particular badge. They have the artillery badge. It's if you're on deployment, or if you're serving with a US Navy sailor or a British sailor, the first thing they'll notice is that particular badge. And they would find it strange that you're a sailor and yet you are wearing an artillery badge. If you're a gunner or a lance bombardier or a bombardier, they'll say, isn't that an artillery rank? And I think that is what makes us unique. We safeguard our traditions and the customs that were left for us by the RMA, and we integrate them in our own unique style. So,
Infatti il-badge kif qed tgħid inti, il-badge għada pjuttost Ingliża, però ovvjament neħħejna il-kuruna tal-reġina tal-Ingilterra.
That's right.
naqblu?
That's right. It is the artillery insignia, where you have the cannon and the cartwheel. L-Ingliżi għandhom il-motto ubique everywhere. Aħna għandna tutella bellice virtutis, which actually means custodians of military prowess. But sometimes I ask soldiers who have just started, what do you think that means? Custodians of military prowess. I mean, I'll ask you, for example, do you know what that actually means?
Li tħaddam valuri militari, jekk minn sezma.
Prosit. Very good.
Għadda niftakar.
You are one of our best drill instructors as well. Pero if you go into the depth of those words, it actually pertains to the success the Royal Malta Artillery had in their campaigns. They were so prowess in their military efforts and the successes they had. We are now considered their custodians, the custodians of that military prowess, that military value and everything. So
Baqaw proud, u taħseb ser li forsi il-qoddim nibdew nimitaw armati differenti, per eżempju anka l-badge, jaff forsi timbidel il-qoddim?
Well, ifimni.
Biex kun Maltija ħanejtek, speċi blessits li għanna l-lum il-ġurnata.
I see. It's a question of, I want to put these words correctly. It's a question of meta ngħidu Maltija. What is non-Maltese about it? It symbolizes a cannon. Now, if you go back before the British were here, before the British arrived, nafu illi fis 1779 jekk nisir żball. I'm not a historian, so I stand to be corrected on these particular dates. Però in 1779 and 1778, the Maltese got a bit fed up of the French. Id-dejqu bil-Franċiżi. There was too much pillaging, there was too much theft, etc., etc. And the Maltese rose up against the French. And historically, the Maltese were considered to have given a bloody nose to the French. I mean, we formed our own militia, and if I'm not mistaken, it was about, I can't give you the number, but there was a great number of men who decided to stand up against the French. Fostom, we had Popolari huwa ċensu Braret minn Birkirkara. He was one of the first officers in charge of the militia. And in fact, in 1800, the Valletta siege, I mean, they really, really hit the French hard. And they used artillery, basic weapons, rudimentary weapons, but they also used artillery pieces. So when the British came afterwards, were invited by Censubrare to take over and help us, the British recognized that the Maltese have a forte where artillery warfare is concerned, artillery conflict is concerned. So the gun and the cartwheel, I wouldn't dare say that it pertains strictly to the British. Mm-hmm. I mean, it pertains to artillery, and even the Americans, even the Italians, and even the French have artillery units, and they are depicted by such a kind. So I wouldn't actually. Għada kieku ħallejna l-kuruna ngħidlek iva. Pero given that argument, għatem il-Maltese Cross fuq wkoll. I haven't got one myself because I wear the flaming grenade. But if you look at the artillery badge, you have the Maltese Cross, what we call the Maltese Cross. It isn't the Maltese Cross. We colloquially call it the Maltese Cross. It is actually the 8-pointed cross of the Holy Order of the St. John of Jerusalem. And Safina Fien, and I stand to be corrected, Atmatawinna. They didn't award
Ħadna l-copyright.
Ħadna l-copyright aħna l-Maltin. Oh, you find it everywhere. You find it on, television screen. I mean, it's now ours, basically, but it's not. If you go into the history of it, it's not. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the Order of St. John left Malta to the French without putting up a fight. And that says a lot about their particular rule as well, if I may.
Taħseb li konna niġġieldu ma' ħafna nies sir, naħseb dak iż-żmien.
Ara l-Malti jien nara mill-history tagħna, we're a friendly people. We're a lovely people. Bit-tajjeb u bil-ħażin tagħna, we're a lovely people. And we're very cordial, we know how to welcome somebody. Imma mbagħad jekk dak il-persuna jdejjaqna.
Jew jipprova jerkibna.
Eżattament, ħanqumu. Omna kontra l-Ingliżi, I mean 1919, meta kien hawn daw l-inġustizzi kontra il-Maltin. Il-Malti dejjem kien tip ta' persuna li yes, I'll welcome you with my open arms, imma tabbużax bija. When we got fed up of the British, after 200 years, we said bye-bye. Pero ma jfissirx illi customs and traditions are nice, are good, are healthy. As long as you don't become a colonial, ma nafx x'kelma jużaw, pero a colonial slave. In other words, jiena nemmen li il-Malti għandu tendenza jimprovizza wkoll. He likes improvising things and overcoming. And therefore, take the Armed Forces of Malta. Aħna nibatu fizzjali l-Amerika fuq training, nibatu fizzjali u other ranks l-Ingilterra, xi trenjaw, l-Irlanda per eżempju. When they come back, all those experiences are intertwined with our own experiences, and naħseb is-sabiħa tagħha hija we adopt and adapt new methods and new approaches to our modus operandi, and that's a beautiful thing.
Sir, qed titkellem
bl-Ingliż.
Le, għas xejn.
I'm a product.
Eżatti, biex forsi tista' tispjega daqsxejn nies
I'm a product of the 70s and 60s and 50s where my parents peress li konna kolonia, my parents left Malta.
Sir, skużani ħan wafqek, pero palissa din naraw il-badge.
L-emblema tal-Forzi Armati ta' Malta. Which symbolizes the artillery tradition that we have.
Ovvjament l-artillerija għadha tintuża llum il-ġurnata. Mhux b'dan it-tip, però iktar b'mod avvanzat.
Eżattament. We have an air defense system, però ovvjament we're not actually an artillery unit.
U l-kulur aħmar u l-blu x'jirrappreżenta?
Darba
Jimma li niftakar l-art u l-baħar. Pero, all right.
Infatti kienem min darba I asked if somebody knows what that symbolizes. U għalli il-lealtà li għanda l-armata li il-Partit Laburista u il-Partit Nazjonalista, which was absolutely, no, those are the actual artillery colors as well.
All right.
And if you look at the Canadian artillery, the Australian artillery, tinsiex Malta is a Commonwealth country as well. So we have Commonwealth traditions as well. So when you see red and blue for an armed forces, that means it's an artillery regiment.
Skużani, waqqaftek.
No, it's okay. Kienu siefru, ovvjament, missieri kien fis-servizz Britanniku wkoll, and I'm a product of those days fej you were spoken to in English. My father was English as well, and therefore we used to speak English. Naf nitkellem bil-Malti, imma sometimes when I'm a bit nervous on programs like this. Xismu, I apologize. Xismu. Pero, yeah, it's the AFM has a wonderful history and a history that one can be proud of.
U x'taħseb li l-Ingilterra ovvjament kellha impatt kbir fuq Malta, speċjalment qed insemmu l-Armata. X'impatt iktar ħallew di fuq l-Armata? Li forsi għadna nsibuha millum il-ġurnata wkoll.
Well, if you look at the rank structure, the organizational structure of the Armed Forces of Malta, the Armed Forces Act, the impact, if we can call it, I'd call it an effect, was a positive one. Why reinvent the wheel when you have something which systematically is good?
Bil-Malti għanna għawl twaqqax knisja u tibni oħra.
Eżattament. Għal xiex. Especially if you jekk iżomm il-bażi, il-foundation ta' xi ħaġa tajba u tibni fuqha. I mean, ħafna nies ġieli jissaqsuni pajzana jgħidu li civilians jgħidu li ma you're a bit too British in your ways. I beg to differ. Lewenet, there's a distinction, there's a difference between English and the word British. I mean, English, I wouldn't put down anything within the Armed Forces of Malta to be English. But if you were to ask me, are there British connotations? Are there British ingredients? I would say yes, there are. But then again, I can also say that there are Italian aspects. There are American aspects. There are Irish aspects. Why? Because we send our personnel out to various military institutions, academies, and they come back with certain methods and approaches which are tried and tested and good. And as I said, nimmixjawhom bil-affarijiet tagħna. Pereżempju, minux kellna naħseb tiftakru lil Clint Bonnici u l-Antoine Cassar.
Niftakarhom
Minux marru l-Ingilterra. Catterick, which is the Army School of Ceremony, and it is one of the best places to go fejn u konċernat ċeremonjal. U jkollhom minn ħafna pajjiżi. Spiċċaw jgħalmu l-Ingliżi. Mela kellek żewġ soldati Maltin li marru f'dan l-iskola u fejn kien hemm il-maġġoranza soldati Ingliżi u spiċċaw jgħalmuhom. L-RSM tal-iskola u għandi bil-miktub, l-RSM tal-iskola għallhom at times meta bdew jagħmlu s-sword drill jew il-color drill, at times għallhom that's the way to do it.
That's true.
You know, so vera għandan tendenza il-Malti jgħid ta' barra ħjar. Yeah, we've got a
U għed semmijak ser, anka specialment meta kellna Maltin li majru deployments u koll. U ftit hawn li jafu, illi l-Maltin dejjem għamlu suċċess kbir.
ħafna.
Jiġifieri għal pajjiż żgħir ħafna u forsi jiena u inti li ltqajna magħhom daw in-nies u koll morna barra minn Malta. Dejjem kien hemm suċċess kbir. Jiġifieri l-kompetizzjoni speċjalment il-Malti li ħobb jikkompeti dejjem għamel suċċess kbir. Jiġifieri u ftit hawn nies naħseb illi jafu. Kemm daw il-korsi se jsiru barra minn Malta, ftit hawn nies li isegwu u sfortunatament naħseb ma tantx hawn awareness ta' kemm isiru fil-verità minn wara l-kwinti għax forsi l-AFM narawha isa dejjem. U sa ċertu punt tajjeb il-militar dejjem naraw ħisu moħbi ħanejtek. Imma ovvjament għax huwa pajjiż li huwa indipendenti, li forsi meta naraw il-militar tfisser xi ħaġa li qed inqalat xi ħaġa, però fil-verità daw is-suċċessi kbar li għamlu l-Maltin meta marru barra minn Malta kienu kbar ukoll. U kompetew ma' nies li huma ġo Special Forces li huma ta' ċertu kalibru wkoll, jiġifieri ma rridux ninsew dal-effert kbir kemm li jsir meta jkunu Malta kif ukoll meta marru barra minn Malta mbagħad, jiġifieri.
That's right. That is perfectly right. I mean, everywhere we have been, be it Europe, anywhere in Europe, Georgia, whatever, the UK, Ireland, the United States, they have always been impressed by what we have to offer. Għaxix, insemmi l-sempliċi eżempju.
Kellna ta' rescuer li mar l-Amerika u koll.
Esattament. Il-Glenn, that's right. And he came top of his class. I mean, and then you have aspects fej darba personalment kont ma' rescuer Amerikan u konna qed nagħmlu training u qedlu issa what we'll do is we'll abseil down this cliff and what we'll do is we'll swim 100 meters and we'll climb up the other cliff. Ali, I can't do that. Why not? My sphere of responsibility is life-saving at sea. And my area of expertise is at sea. Whereas my area of expertise was land and sea. So we focus much more on improvising. Whereas illum il-ġurnata, and it's a downfall, anybody who is in the know where military aspects are concerned, it is a downfall that nowadays most soldiers, professional soldiers in bigger countries, are very dependent on technology. And if their equipment doesn't work, you find them in a situation where they're like, oh, what do I do? Il-Malti, he'll improvise and overcome.
Għat s-semmek għat fakkarni fi storja ta' missirja, xim missir u kol kien fl-armi. Allura kien jgħidli per eżempju, specialment il-ġodda li jibdaw jiddependu ħafna, s-siri kien fuq fil-maritime, ġiviri, jiddependu ħafna fuq GPS.
Eżattament.
Jek imullek il-GPS, se tagħmel. Ġifieri, serna veru, serna seppwis dipendenti fuq. Però l-Malti l-istess kif qed issemmi inti sir, baqa' anke isma' jekk imullek GPS, x'se tagħmel u trid tipprova. Meta barra minn Malta kważi jispeċjalizzaw fuq ħaġa waħda biss. U daqshekk, ġifieri aħna nippruvaw naqbdu l-assets kollha, nippruvaw naraw kif ħanimprovizzaw letteralment.
Multitasking.
Incredibly. U kif bdiet tiżviluppa mbagħad l-AFM kif telqu l-Ingliżi?
Mela, so that 73 it was redesignated as the Armed Forces of Malta. U naħseb, again, I'm not a historian, I can give you a basic insight. Is 70s and the 80s, to an extent, let's say halfway into the 80s, meta telqu l-Ingliżi, Malta found itself in a situation where its main focus was the infrastructure, right, and rebuilding, and especially after the Second World War. And the Armed Forces of Malta was placed in charge of the labor corps, yeah, where كان الديما والدراين المالتين, they were pioneer outfits, and so its main task was land operations in respect to rebuilding an infrastructure. The 80s saw the introduction of the task force, and the task force was in charge or placed in responsible for infantry duties, air and maritime operations, where the Armed Forces of Malta was in charge of the air defense and logistics. And you had these two outfits, two organizations, which carried out their duties, mainly search and rescue.
كانت armata maqsuma fit-tnejn?
كانت armata maqsuma fit-tnejn, but each had their own responsible tasks.
Okay.
Yeah, even the task force had their own badge.
Okay.
And però in 1988 things got a bit stranger fej jidħol il-military identity tagħna, because the task force and the AFM amalgamated. And there was a parade on Piazza San George fej the colors, għax il-task force kellhom il-colors tagħhom, il-colors huma il-bnadar, I'll just explain it for anybody listening. Il-colors kienu żewġ bnadar illi jittik l-identità tiegħek, the soul ħanajdek. The colors were laid up, u llum jekk persuna jidħol into St. John's Co-Cathedral fil-sagristija, the task force colors can be found laying at rest in there. The armed forces and the task force amalgamated, u the then president, acting President Paul Schwere, presented the first colors to the armed forces of Malta. And the colors huma għandek il-force color u għandek il-presidential color. Okay. Now this is very strange for it sometimes raises a lot of eyebrows in the military community, in the international military community. Like earlier on, I said that we have an artillery identity. Our customs and traditions are artillery. Our parent regiment, L-AFM. So how come we were presented with two infantry colors? You see, the infantry carry colors. So it's a contradiction in terms. But if you look at it, this is the beauty of our armed forces. And if one pays a bit of attention to what the colors symbolize, one will understand where it's coming from. L-affarijiet li għamlu missirietna fl-RMA, il-campaigns li għamlu, il-ġlieda alongside il-counterparts tagħhom fil-British Army. You never want to forget that. Vera, għaw nies ġili smajta, imma għaw nies li jridu jerradikaw il-history. They're not comfortable in the fact illi Malta kienet parti mir-Renju Unit. And they feel slightly, somewhat insulted by it.
Mekka din naraw ukoll
That's right. Those are the għandek il-force color, u mbagħad għandek il-presidential color. Il-force color hija il-artillery gun u il-presidential color huwa Forzi Armati bil-Derriding Tower.
U hemmhekk qed issemmi il-grenade li għandek inti wkoll.
Il-flaming grenade. Dak kien
il-bera.
il-flaming grenade hija l-ewwel weapon, ħanajtek, l-ewwel bomba li jużaw l-artillery outfits. Allura, peress li we have an artillery tradition that symbolizes the first artillery weapon ever used. It's the pomegranate.
U kif hemm il-gunners jilbsu tal-artillerija u l-officers hemm xi differenza? Ovvjament biex turi li wieħed officer qed nissopponi u ieħor.
It is a identity thing, però it also has a rich tradition as well. L-artillerija ukoll il-Royal Malta Artillery fit-tieni gwerra dinjija sabu lilhom infushom in a catch-22 situation. Qabel, if you go back to the First World War, or qabel is-Second World War, right? L-artillerija kienu jilbsu dak li jissejjaħ l-SD cap. Yeah? It was a cap. U kienu jilbsu in number 2 dress, even to battle.
To battle.
Yeah? U fuq l-SD cap kellek emblema, kellek badge kbira. Cut a long story short, in 1938-39, Winston Churchill, 39 I do believe it was, Winston Churchill issued a directive in the artillery units, the artillery regiment, has to change its SD cap into a beret. Okay. Pero dak iż-żmien l-Ingliżi, they were ovvjament kienu qed jiffokaw fuq il-war effort u ma tantx kellhom ovvjament flus liktar. So, okay, the officers and the other ranks of the artillery units took off their SD cap and started wearing their beret. Imma l-badge li kellhom kien kbira wis. And there was an officer, a particular officer, who was looking in the mirror and looking at him wearing this particular beret. And it's too big. You know, he went to his colonel and he said, "It's too big. It looks absolutely awful." And that's the order from Winston Churchill himself. Pero baqa dal-jewden u fuq il-collar tagħhom ta' number 2 dress kellhom it's called il-Granada. And what he did was he took it off and he placed it on the cap badge, on the beret, and he said, "That looks good. That looks absolutely, it's in proportion to the beret." And he said, "I'll go and show it to the colonel." He wore it and walked in, and the colonel liked it, and traditionally that's why they wear that.
Yeah.
The other ranks didn't have this particular badge. They used to wear a gold one, a smaller one, which was too small for the beret. Okay. So until the Ministry of Defense produced smaller cap badges, the other ranks had to wear the big one. Okay. So apart from identifying an officer from another rank, the reason is because they didn't like the actual cap badge.
Ma xerqitlux.
Ma xerqitlux. I'm the only other rank in the army. Pala other rank, jien minix commissioned officer. Mm-hmm. I'm a warrant officer. Pero Commander Armed Forces, my position is unique. Whoever fills this position is unique. I'm the senior most non-commissioned officer of the Armed Forces selected for this particular job. And Commander Armed Forces bestows upon you the privilege and honor of wearing the flaming grenade.
U inti forsi għaw minn ma jafx, pero inti l-Garrison Sergeant Major u koll tal-AFM, ġifiri.
I'm the man who goes around barking u najat ma nis.
Ta' kull fil-ħodu nisimaw il-Garrison Sergeant. Xenta, ħajibdi l-ġurnata. Xinu xol ta' Garrison Sergeant Major?
Well, basically, it's, in a nutshell, it's enforcing and ensuring that Commander Armed Forces of Malta's directives, policies are being carried out within the force. So you could list them down as being discipline and personnel management. One of ħafna nies jgħidu dak tal-parati. Dak li jkun fil-parata jgħajjat man-nies u jittrenjom. That is an aspect of my job, but it isn't my actual job. My actual job is welfare within the Armed Forces of Malta, morale, ensuring morale, and being the go-between between the other ranks and the Commander Armed Forces of Malta. The Commander always has his office open. If I need to speak to him about something, or I have access in that respect. It's a very unique position.
Kemm fiha membri ser illum il-ġurnata l-AFM?
Well, obviously, dejjem qed nippruvaw inħajru iktar żgħażagħ jitlu fl-AFM. And a lot qed jitħajru biex jitlu fil-Forzi Armati ta' Malta. But we need more people. Obviously, our current strength is roughly about 1,800 personnel. We should be approximately 2,000, over 2,000. But society isn't helping us either. I mean, you do find those individuals who want a challenge in their life, and but there are those individuals who unfortunately ask themselves, why should I put myself through 4 months of grueling, challenging aspects and not just find a comfortable job, you know? So we find ourselves in a unique situation where we have to appeal and you know, try and...
Ullum il-ġurnata wkoll milux reċentament rajna li anke l-paga żdiedet għall-membri tal-AFM, ġifieri.
Which is a plus.
Eżatti, ħatejn. U kif qed tgħid inti, jiena xi kultant inkun naqaxettiku fis-sens ta' ovvjament ix-xogħol tal-AFM huwa kumpless ħafna, ġifieri, u nixtieq nistaqsik x'inhu x-xogħol tal-AFM fl-aħħar mill-aħħar. Pero mbagħad xi kultant, pereżempju jiena hemm il-leħja eżempju li narawha barra minn Malta li jistgħu jħallu l-leħja eżempju. Qed issemmi jekk kien hemm l-Irlanda.
Niftakrek darba tagħmel l-inspection inti.
Ġifieri, forsi fi żmien ir-rekrutaġġ nifhimha li forsi titqaxxar il-leħja u hekk. U l-pulizija llum il-ġurnata din jiġġieldu fuq għadi tal-leħja wkoll, ġifieri. Naħseb forsi rridu nabdejt jew daqsxejn forsi affarijiet antik li forsi ta' tradizzjoni forsi aktar nħajru iktar nies fl-aħħar mill-aħħar, però nifhem li fir-rekrutaġġ hemm bżonn ikun hemm id-disciplina kbira, ġifieri.
If I may, Glenn, it's the same as tiftakar konna għadna nibbuljaw il-boots. I had a guy come up to me. I was outside having a cup of coffee. One of the young soldiers said, "Sir, do you mind if I speak to you?" Għetlu, ejjelo. Għalli, sir, għaxix ma ġibuħomx tal-alakka il-boots.
Ikun
lest. And I was like, if you get, jekk ġibhom tal-alakka, where is the prestige, where's the self-satisfaction of producing something out of nothing, crudely? The same turnout as a lacquer, but where are you going to get that satisfaction from? Every time I walk out with my boots bulled, I'm satisfied. I'm proud of that. The same as my son, my young son.
U jħu l-ħin għax da biex taħamlu għandek mental inqas sijat.
You have to focus and you have a responsibility. Pero anka t-tifel għalli da, għetlu mur għamil is-sodda. Għalli, mux sanerġa norqot issa l-lejla. Good reasoning, fantastic reasoning. Leave it. No. Do your bed. Because if you can do the small things, if you can literally get the small things done, then you've achieved something. And it's the same with the beard. It's the same with the small nitty-gritties. If you can focus on appearing disciplined and in a proper way, then you'll be able to focus and give the same aspect of discipline into the larger things. So,
taħseb li n-nisa din jitilfu s-sens ta' disċiplina?
I do believe so. I unfortunately, and I may stand to be criticized for saying this, pero as a 52-year-old man, society, and I don't believe it's anybody's fault, except society in general. I mean, illum il-ġurnata, per eżempju, fi żmieni, okay, mhux qed ngħid li tajba, però I'll come to a point. Fi żmieni, if my father couldn't afford to buy me a sports car, toy, I would create a sports car out of a matchbox and pretend it is a sports car. And I would play around with this sports car as if, this box of matches, as if it was a sports car. Illum il-ġurnata, I'm just giving you a basic, rudimentary example. Illum jekk tidħol fuq PlayStation, for example, to name one of the game consoles, whatever they call them, the console itself, the system itself, creates everything for you. So it's all you have to do is sit back and watch and enjoy the game. Your mind doesn't have to
Be creative.
And I do believe, now I'm not an expert on this, it's just a personal opinion, I do believe that unfortunately that comes at a cost. And you can see it throughout. Aħna u Malta għandna pajjiż, jekk Alla jrid, thank God, we're a peaceful country, we're not at war with anybody, we don't go to conflict. You wake up every day, life has its struggles, There are many struggles in life, and sometimes those struggles can be very, very harsh on a person. But we have a relatively smooth life. And I do believe that that smoothness takes away a certain edge from character. And therefore, a person becomes a bit, relaxed, iżejjed. And therefore, why do you want to put yourself through a gauntlet, for example? Insibuhom.
U għaw n-nies li l-istess li jitħajru anka l-avventura u għek ġifiri għaw, pero ħafna minn nies li għedin insibu l-lum il-ġurnata u ma forsi kvettajt inti, jridu jisibu kollox lest, meta fil-verità fil-ħajja. Jien anka per eżempju l-iskola, meta jkunu għedin l-iskola, anka dik il-ħaġa ta' kompetizzjoni, vera ma nemminx li għanna bżonn inneħuha, anzi, nixtieq illi jisma' għax da fl-aħħar mill-aħħar kif sejra d-dinja tax-xogħol jew sejra l-ħajja normali, inti issessib kollox lest.
Maybe I'm a bit too old to say this, but in my perspective, everybody getting a medal for participating in a race takes away the achievement that the man who came, or the kid who came first has gained. I mean, everybody got a medal.
U għasabieħ li kunem, pero mbagħad jisek laqsa tipprova timprovja inti fl-aħħar mill-aħħar qed naraw daqsxejn. U qed issemmijek, jiena milux kont sifirtu iltqajt ma' ħafna Iżraeliti. U ħafna mill-Iżraeliti huma li bil-fors meta jkunu żgħar iridu jitlu fl-armata. Eżempju, u jitalmu affarijiet, ġifieri, tal-ħajja ta' kuljum. Eżempju, ħaniħu minni. Alright, ommi kienet torini ħafna mill-affarijiet, ġifieri, tal-ħajja ta' kuljum. Però mbagħad bdejt nipperfezzjona meta tħalt fl-armi, eżempju kif ngħaddi l-ħwejjeġ, kif niblakka aktar iż-żarbun. U jisek tiġi aware ta' dawn l-affarijiet kollha, forsi anke ġieri kienet tagħmlu li daqsxejn ommi jew hekk. Imma llum il-ġurnata tant issir iffissat, tant li kważi jekk ħatamelu lek le ħanamlu jiena ver. Taħseb illi forsi hawn bżonn li n-nies jitlu ftit żmien fl-armi, ma nafx. U forsi jibdew ismar, ovvjament m'hemmx għalfej bil-forsi tidħol fl-armi biex titgħallimhom daw l-affarijiet, però taħseb li l-armi tkun xi ħaġa li ħatibdilhom ħajjithom daw?
I do believe that yes, when you join the army, meta tidħol pajzan u tagħmel l-4 xhur rekrutaġġ, your life changes totally. Pero coming back to what you said about the Israelis, for example, who they are forced and conscription, yeah? Mm-hmm. It works there mainly because again, I'm not an authority on this, but I do believe what I'm saying has enough weight in it. They're under threat, and they believe that they are under threat. they will respond more because they feel that it's their duty as well, even if you're not a volunteer. Yeah, because Israel is in conflict with Palestine, so it's a constant thing. Having said that, if you look at the history of conscription, namely in Italy and other countries, in the United Kingdom as well, it failed. It failed so much that they changed the system. Italy, for example, changed the system and started focusing more on absorbing volunteers.
Okay.
Not given that history, that conscription has failed or fails, I wouldn't recommend it myself. I do believe that there are things that society can do, especially at schools, where discipline is given a bit more accent. Not that teachers and schools are not doing a wonderful job. They are. Allah ħares ma jkunux huma, and kudos to them. Pero I do believe that unfortunately, because of progress, because of technological progress and everything, you lose that edge. Mm-hmm. Now, when people apply to join the armed forces, they go through a 4-month gruesome training procedure. Gruesome. It's tough. It presents its challenges. I do believe that the people do respond well to it and come out better people where discipline is concerned.
U meta tara bniedem bl-uniformi, speċjalment in-nies kif iħarsu lejkom, għatem dik il-ċertu kif taqbad tgħid isa jiena meta kont inħares lej pulizija jew kont inħares lej soldat, lej fireman, nies bl-uniformi, kienet tiġini ċertu isni mhux toqgħod attent kif titkellem, imma kif tares lejh bniedem tiġik ċertu seduċenza? Seduzzjoni. Għadkom issibuha dik jew isa naqset, għax jisni xi kultant nara naqas ir-rispett lejn nies li jilbsu l-uniformi.
Milux Clint Bonici l-RSM tal-4 Regiment. Morna ġo raħal. We were gathering some quotations to do something. Allura, we alighted from our Land Rover and started walking within the village square. U l-ammont ta' nies, and this is not bluff or anything, I'm being perfectly honest, l-ammont ta' nies li ġew fuqna u għallunna grazzi ta' servizz, grazzi. You felt chuffed. I felt very, very, very proud. So, ma nemminx li hemm seduzzjoni. Nemmen li in fact, if you see the recent poll, there is a great amount of trust towards the armed forces of Malta. And I believe nemmen illi dak it-trust ġejja mill-valuri u l-standards illi inħadnu.
X'inhu ħafna nies anke forsi pereżempju biex jitħajru, x'inhu x-xogħol tal-FM, x'inkludi? Huwa vast ħafna u diffiċli nispjegawh kważi f'programm wieħed. Però b'mod in ġenerali, x'inkludi?
Basically, there are so many aspects and rewarding challenges within the AFM. Jien inni hemmhekk 33 sena. I could have left meta laqt il-25 sena. I didn't leave, mhux għax ma sibx job jew ma nafx x'nagħmel hemm barra. It's because I love it. I love every single day of it. Why? Because every day you're presented with something different, something new, something that challenges you. And in my case, meta tħall fl-Armata, bdejt il-First Regiment, kont Charlie Company, Operational Platoon dak iż-żmien, però dejjem xtaqt nagħmel xi ħaġa differenti. U għamilt request biex immur il-helicopter flight. U għamilt 25 sena bħala helicopter rescue swimmer. Issa, that was my career choice. Illum il-ġurnata, you join the army, you have such a wide spectrum of career opportunities that range from driver, mechanical engineer, explosive ordnance disposal operator, diver, master for patrol boat, engineer for patrol boat, electrical engineer for aircraft, engineer for aircraft, mission system operator, administration, special operations unit personnel operator, infantry soldier, like yourself, an instructor, a drill instructor. We still miss you on that, by the way, għax inti kont wieħed mill-aħjar li kellna.
Ejwa, nis kien jaraw nidobbien imma.
Le.
Kienet parti mix-xogħol, mhux hekk.
Smart as xismu. And your colleague said hello, by the way.
Selli li ħafna li.
So there's a wide spectrum of it. It's just choosing the meta titħol fil-rekrutaġġ u tagħmel ir-rekrutaġġ. There is a particular period assigned so that they take them throughout the various AFM units. So għanna ħamsa, 1 regiment, 3 regiment, l-air wing, il-maritime u l-4 regiment. The 4 regiment, its task is training school and band, AFM band. And so they take them to these regiments so that they introduce them to what we do and everything. And so person can...
U semmejt, hemm il-1 regiment, 3 regiment, 4 regiment, ittux sar minnu.
Good question. Le, infatti, fil-reorganization tal-AFM in the late, if I'm not mistaken, late 90s, early 2000s, the powers to be in the armed forces of Malta deemed illi maritime squadron and air wing need to be independent units. The workload and the sphere of responsibilities that they were being given did not call for them to be subordinate to a command structure of one single regiment. The 2nd regiment kella il-air defense battery, il-helicopter flight u il-maritime squadron. U kella l-camp commandant, they call it camp commandant. So it was decided to disband, it was a composite regiment, they call it a composite regiment, to disband that particular regiment and give a unique independent identity, independent from a particular regiment, and give them unit status, regimental status. Now, generally, it is tradition, once you disband a regiment, you don't restructure it with so 2 was left out. So you have 1 regiment, 3 regiment, okay, and 4 regiment, maritime squadron, and the air wing. But għandek HQAFM.
But għandek HQAFM. U semmejt l-ewwel bħala courses u hekk li jsiru. Daw ukoll issallhom il-ġurnata tiġu akkreditati wkoll bħala jekk eżempju wieħed engineer ukoll ġew akkreditati li tista' tużahom barra mill-AFM ukoll. Jiġifieri min jixtieq li jenaqat mal-AFM jista' juża, pereżempju jekk kien electrical engineer nagħmlu mod, jista' juża barra mill-xismu, ġifieri hija xi ħaġa li naħseb li FM kienet vera għamlet ħaġa interessanti u sabiħa li tgħid tal-inqas esperjenzaj daqsxejn li FM ukoll u jekk xi darba tkun biссibek li titlaq eżempju tista' tuża wkoll dan il-kors forsi tista' tagħmel part-time eżempju bih ukoll. Ma nafx jekk għal min jitħajjar, ġifieri.
That's right.
U ma' żminijiet nafu issa li anka l-FM ġabet vetturi ġodda, patrol boat, qed iġibu patrol boat ġdida.
State of the art.
State of the art. Ovvjament intefqu ħafna flus, ġifieri, però ovvjament hemm il-bżonn dejjem.
One of the main objectives tal-commander, il-Brigadier Jeffrey Kulmi, when he took over the armed forces as Commander Armed Forces of Malta, was the focus on a number of aspects. And most of those aspects were infrastructure, building better accommodation for the personnel, training, and equipment. And obviously the emphasis is getting these things off the ground and putting them into effect, which makes us more effective in our response towards whatever we're given. You know, one has seen a dramatic change throughout the years from 1973 till today in uniform, in welfare, in infrastructure. You know, and that is one of the main objectives of
U meta semmi vetturi u hekk, ovvjament hemm il-vetturi normali u vetturi speċjalizzati wkoll. Tista' semmilna xi ftit, pereżempju, nafu li hemm il-helicopters, eżempju, x'hemm iktar li huma.
Għandek il-139s, they're search and rescue helicopters. Jien kon naħdem fuq l-Alouette. L-Alouette it's a very old helicopter, but an effective helicopter. Għamilt kważi 25 sena naħdem fuqha. We have state-of-the-art aircraft, the King Airs, and they have a maximum range of 5 hours and more in order to operate. As you mentioned, the new patrol boat that should be coming. It's a state-of-the-art patrol boat, which gives us a high degree of autonomy where operational status is concerned out at sea, better accommodation for the personnel who are going to serve on it, and waħda mill-aspetti huwa illi you cannot. U di esperjenzajta fl-Armata, you cannot just simply stay on a status quo. You have to build new methods, new approaches to a new world that is always developing. And you need equipment, you need training, and you need, per esempio, if you look at the human resource, which is one of the most important aspects, the human resource. Per esempio, li kont nagħmel jiena fin-90s, early 90s bħala drill instructor, we don't do them today. Li kienu jagħmlu fis-70s, m'għadniex nagħmluhom illum il-ġurnata. We are adopting more modern approaches and modern methods in order to reach the ultimate objective, which is to safeguard our national sovereignty, to safeguard the national interest, and that is one of our most important aspects. L-istess, which is why we send personnel out on courses to the United States, to the United Kingdom. Ħafna nies jgħidu, and goes back to your earlier question, is there English influences in the armed forces? There's a multitude of influences, but there's a particular influence, which is our Maltese influence. Naf li qed nitkellem bl-Ingliż, pero I'm a product of society that comes from the 70s and 60s.
U semmejt il-patrol boat, ovvjament nafu li palissa l-situazzjoni tal-immigranti hija kbira wkoll, ġifieri l-ajruplani ħin kollu għaddejjin, ovvjament dejjem bis-search u bir-rescues fl-aħħar mill-aħħar. Patrol boat hemm erja kbira illi qegħdin naraw il-patrol boat hemmhekk. P-71. Qegħdin naraw illi ovvjament it-territorju Malti fuq il-baħar huwa wieħed mill-ikbar, ġifieri bil-forsi kollok tavvanza fuq di teknoloġija fl-aħħar mill-aħħar.
One has to.
Ta' bil-fors. Taħseb li ġejjin iktar?
As I said, the objective of the Commander Armed Forces is particularly to not content himself with being good. You can never be content with being good.
L-Armata dejjem għaddejja.
You have to be better. So we're always striving to better ourselves, and the more state-of-the-art equipment that we can acquire, taking into consideration our limitations as a country as well. I mean, our limited financial resources and what have you. You have to take them into consideration. One has to be realistic. But yes, we're always trying to better ourselves and yeah.
U daw in-nies jagħmlu żmien twil fuq il-baħar ukoll, ġifieri għax hemm ċirkostanzi forsi tħriġ tu
naħħilhom il-kappell.
U hemm ġran hemm kważi ġieli laqqas jaraw il-familja wkoll, ġifieri jmorru fuq il-baħar 5 ijiem inserta tinqala' xi ħaġa oħra jridu jeqgħu barra, ġifieri.
Ħafna nies ma jkunux jafu.
Ma jkunux jafu x'qed jiġri, ma jkunux jafu. U għalhekk naħseb li anke l-medja u l-aħbarijiet għandhom jirrakonoxxu daw l-affarijiet anke n-nies barra għandhom jaraw jistaqsu x'hemm fl-AFM jekk għandkom questions jew xi ħaġa u għalhekk sabiħ dal-podcast għax ħafna minn nies ikunu jsiru jafu daqsxejn isiru iktar aware, jiġifieri l-armata taħdem b'mod kważi behind the scenes. Meta fil-verità qed isiru affarijiet kbar, qed tagħmel xogħol brillanti u n-nies forsi ma jafux mhux konxi. Imma l-armata ovvjament tiżżomm peress li huwa pajjiż demokratiku, pajjiż li m'hawnx gwerra fl-aħħar mill-aħħar, l-armata jisek tipprova tevitaħħa milli tkun daqshekk man-nies ħanejtek għax ma tridx li turi sens militari wkoll sa ċertu punt.
Thankfully we do organize a number of
L-open days,
public relations exercises illi l-membri tal-pubbliku ma mistednin jitlu jaraw, you know.
U hemm waħda li vera tinteressani, Soldier for a Day.
Ah, yes. Soldier for a Day.
X'jiġri fis-Soldier for a Day?
It's just that, Soldier for the Day, they're given a very basic insight into the life of a soldier. And they start from the morning bil-PT, physical training, and
Lajjat ma jonqos?
Lajjat ma jonqos. Eżattament. Ħafna nies jgħidu ma għalx tajjad daqshekk fuq il-parade ground, għalx drill instructors jiġu jgħidu ma wiċċek and give so much. There is a specific, definitive reason for it. Noise disorients, and noise can upset a person, and noise can put a person, discombobulate a person. And if you can control your reaction to noise, such as shouting, such as certain other aspects that might cause stress and anxiety, if you can control that, then you're going to be in a disciplined position to react to whatever you're being faced. Now, when we have a soldier for the day, for example, and I have a civilian on the parade ground, and I go up to them, and I can't shout now because unajjat ma
wiċċu.
Inti kellek vuċi, ukoll. Jiġifieri. And you see that reaction, and they walk off. You know that noise, which is nothing except noise, has discombobulated. Now, we can't have that. If we're going to go into an operation, in Charlie Company, that's right, and special duties, and you've done your part for your country, and kudos to you as well. When you go into operations or you're faced with a crisis management task, you need to stay focused. So we try and simulate what can disorient you. And we do that by noise, by shouting, by placing you into challenges that you yourself
under pressure.
Under pressure. And so Soldier for the Day basically it focuses on that, giving them an insight of a soldier.
Biex natu xenarju lin-nies, pereżempju, jekk jiena pajżan u inqala xi ħaġa u niġi ngħajjat miegħek, inti lest li waqt li għattajja ġowiċi, jina les nikkontrolla li l-nifsi u isma, għax tagħmel, la ħataqbad tarrestaħ, la. Trid tipprova tifhem dak li jkun ukoll, ġifieri rridu narawha f'dak l-aspett.
Which brings me back to, once you were saying that, brings me back to when I was in London last, I think it was about 3 years ago or something like that. I was just walking by, and I was with a friend. There was a commotion near one of the particular subways, our undergrounds there. And we were approaching, CFB, and I tried to find out what was going on. Somebody had fallen down the stairs there, and everybody was sort of panicking and saying, everybody was chatting away. And when I looked down, I noticed that individual, the casualty, was alone. Or I just, me and my friend, we just took charge. Sakemma ġew l-ambulance. And I boiled that down to the training that we receive. We respond, we're proactive in our response to something that needs to be responded to. And
infatti ngħidu min jilbes uniformi soldat 24/7.
Esattament.
Sa jekkux pajżan, jekkux jgħat bl-uniformi inti soldat 24/7.
And that's where the training goes
Kicks in. U nemmen li ħafna nies anka għandhom jippruvaw għaddi soldier for a day. Tal-inqas, kif qed ngħidu, hemm raġuni l-affarijiet isiru bi studji kbar daw ma ġiex Sur Roger Malvejn qal isma' illum ħanamlu hekk, ra film u ħanamlu hekk, però hemm training għaddew minn ħafna proċeduri daw isiru l-Amerika, l-Ingilterra, isiru f'kull pajjiż, jiġifieri li bniedem ikun under pressure kapaċi li jisma' ħaniħendilja ħadi. Kifet inti accident isma' ħaniħendilja. Dak il-ħin vera xaw min jibża x'nidħol f'xi basla jwek, però jekk inti għandek il-training, għandek l-affarijiet li jisma' taf x'inti tagħmel, inti bniedem organizzat għandek dik id-disciplina ġo fik li jisma' m'hemm xejn li m'għandekx għalfejtejn, anzi naf x'in nagħmel, mela ħanieħu ħsieb. Naħseb tkun xi ħaġa li n-nies għandhom ikunu looking forward iktar milli jibżgħu, speċjalment is-soldier for a day.
True.
U kif jagħmel l-AFM operattiva? Narawha missions barra minn Malta, missions f'Malta stess, fit-territorju Malti, x'jagħmel operattiva l-AFM?
It has a long-standing good reputation where operations abroad are concerned, and we partake mostly, one can say, in humanitarian and peacekeeping fields, and throughout the late 2000s, early 2000s, especially since Malta joined the European Union, we started participating, I think it was 1990? The first time Malta participated in the Partnership for Peace operation. And that was peacekeeping in Bulgaria for humanitarian reasons. But throughout the 1990s, we had various officers and the ranks participating in a number of European Union led missions where peacekeeping and international humanitarian aid is concerned. And I believe that such operations, such deployments, placed us back on the map. Jekk terġa' tmur lura lej ir-Royal Malta Artillery, the 60s, the 50s, 40s, 30s, 20s, and further back, you see Maltese soldiers in the British Army, in their own regiment, being deployed to various campaigns. And they had a high reputation in the British Army. Royal Malta Artillery were considered very, very good. In fact, 1969, Her Majesty the Queen wrote a collect with regards to the Royal Malta Artillery. And by participating in these particular deployments, like, for example, Lebanon, Georgia, but again, on purely humanitarian aid and crisis management operations and deployments, we are giving the Maltese are giving their little to the international arena.
Għax ħafna minn nies jisom ma jkunux jafu li Malta għandha l-parteċipazzjoni tagħha vera pajjiż żgħir, però jsiru operations ma barra minn Malta,
U
jsir
jgħidu
training ma
pereżempju,
barra.
intom x'tistgħu toffru x'għandkom hawnhekk?
Ekku.
Are you capable of, let's say another country comes and tries to take Malta over, are you capable of, fighting and all that jazz?
Infatti Malta anka f'ċertu sitwazzjonijiet dejjem kien il-pajjiż li prova jżomm anka paċi mal-pajjiżi l-oħra, kien kważi intermedjarju f'daw il-kwistjonijiet.
Moħħi mbagħad jibda jixri ta' qed niftakar, Glenn. A couple of years ago, konna qegħdin l-Italja and u kien hemm it was a search and rescue exercise, yeah. And I think it was in the beginning where we started participating in these exercises within the Mediterranean. And you had countries like France, Spain, Bulgaria, a couple of other Eastern European countries, yeah, u l-Italja. U Malta ħadet sem bil-helikopter tagħha l-Aluet. L-oħrajn kellhom state-of-the-art helicopters, modern helicopters, Dauphins, or whatever, yeah, but they had state-of-the-art equipment and everything. U aħna morna bl-Aluet tagħna, yeah? And we were assigned a particular area, and that area was our search and rescue zone, where we had to, the others had various areas. The exercise lasted a week, but on the beginning of the exercise, I remember il-kaptan kien Sur Paolo Gauci, captain illum retired, one of the best pilots I've ever flown in a helicopter. They all were, Sur Mike Farrugia, Sur Joe Abdullah, Sur Anthony Zammit. They were heroes. They were the originals, yeah. Pero kont ma' Sur Paolo Gauci, and we were in the briefing room. And we were sitting down, Sur Paolo Gauci, kien hemm technician staff sergeant Charlie Mallia, and myself, and another rescuer. Jek minn isejr Tony Vella kien Sergeant Tony Vella, very good friend of mine. We were sitting down, kien hemm il-Franċiżi, kien hemm all those other countries. Hardly anybody spoke to us, or we didn't speak to them at the beginning, you know. U daħal il-Kurnel Taljan with his adjutant, Malay tiegħu. And he was given the briefing paper to brief all these people on the day's mission. And the colonel, the commander-in-chief of that particular base in Italy, was given this piece of paper, and he looked at it, and aħna qed nisimgħu, ma questo è in italiano. Dove il-verżjoni Inglese da bit-Taljan, fejn il-verżjoni Ingliż. U l-ajutant għallu, that's what we've got. Għallu, all right, ħatamel il-translation inti. Da qed nitkellem couple of years ago. One of the first instances we started participating in these particular exercises. And they were like dumbfounded. What the hell are they going to do? French, Spanish, Bulgaria, another Eastern European country, yeah, Albanian, and us Maltese. How the hell are they going to communicate that to them? The French didn't understand Italian. They didn't even speak in Italian, etc. U Sur Paolo Gauci niftaħar. Bil-wifqa. Allu bit-Taljan. Allu, Signore, if you'd like to give it to me, I'll read it out and translate it for you. And he looked at his adjutant and he said, we've got no one to translate this into English. Bit-Taljan. Allu, no. Allu, okay, thank you. U għet nara l-kaptan li dak iż-żmien lieutenant kien minn għalija, Lieutenant Sur Paolo Gauci, jaqra di, u dimdaw il-pajjiżi kollha, u dimdaw in-nies kollha li kellhom state-of-the-art helicopters u ma nafx xiex. U mbagħad qala bl-Ingliż. And then they were asking him questions in English. And I was, aħna Maltin. U veru. which shows a beautiful
Il-kapacità tal-Malti fejn jidħol dawn
jien dak iż-żmien kont għadni bombardier naħseb jew Lance bombardier. I was like, wow. Il-ser tiegħi.
Ekku, hija xi ħaġa li għandna nkunu proud u l-affarijiet.
Exactly. And these deployments are, some people ask, what can Maltese present to arenas such as those as we're being sent to? And I think the Maltese are, and I've heard it from high-ranking officers and from other countries, a mind frame, an intelligent grasp of how to go about an issue that needs scrutiny, and yes, a versatility and improvisational skills second to none in that respect. And yes, it's like our anti-piracy operations in Somalia, or training in sending personnel over to train in Uganda, where we had members of the Charlie Company.
Palissa il-Lebanon ukoll xek.
Yes, peacekeeping. Eżatt. The arenas we partake on are international humanitarian aid and peacekeeping and anti xismu.
Fil-parti tal-AFM forsi n-nis jara ważajra, pero l-parti tal-AFM hija kbira fil-verità. Għal min jaħseb illi forsi għax dejjem ngħidu jekk tiġi xi gwerra. No, nizal ħares tiġi gwerra ħanejtek, ġifiri, pero ovvjament Malta tagħmel training ma' pajjiżi barranin biex anke jekk jinqala xi ħaġa ikun hemm nies li jistgħu jgħinuna wkoll. Infatti Malta tipprova żomm allejata ma' ħafna mill-pajjiżi biex jekk jinqala xi ħaġa.
Eżatt.
Tipprova tal-inqas ma niġġieldu ma' ħadd.
I mean, ngħidu kif the French in the Second World War, a small pocket of resistance personnel gave a bloody nose to the Germans when they invaded France.
U l-Malti determinati.
Il-Malti. I see that throughout these 33 years in the armed forces. I have seen xejn mu perfett fil-ħajja. Laqas il-ħajja mi perfetta, yeah? Pero I have seen u nħobb insemmihom daw it-tliet kliem, I may be repetitive, but I have seen nothing but dedication, discipline and responsibility in this institution, and I'm proud to be there. We're not perfect, or no army is perfect. Nothing is
impossibbli jiġi kollox tajjeb.
But yeah.
U semmejt l-ewwel il-cadetship li l-Maltin imorru barra minn Malta, x'jiġri eżatt fil-cadetship?
Well, ovvjament palissa infatti għanna 6 or 7 cadets being prepared to be deployed to the Irish National Defence Force, l'Irlanda, in order to spend 1 year, basically 1 year, they are going to be trained in the skills and techniques of infantry, and not only infantry, and their command and leadership, management, personnel management, and crisis management. So they go through a whole year abroad of training with their Irish counterparts. And when they come over, they're given leadership tasks. We also send officers to Sandhurst. It is considered one of the best military academies in the world.
Fej marru anka nis rojali, jek minn
Esattament, yes. Prince William, Prince Harry.
U kellna Maltin li ġew l-ewwel ukoll.
Exactly. Il-Brigadier Geoffrey Culmi, kien hemm ovvjament is-Sur Jason Abeyer. We've had so many successful officers and
daw minn mijiet ta' nies u pajjiżi differenti, jirnexxielek tiġi l-ewwel, impressjonanti.
And what happens is they gain all these training experiences, and then they're given command once they get commissioned, because they go as cadets, officer cadets, and once they're back, they get commissioned and they're given leadership posts, and where they put to effect that which they have been trained upon.
U l-commission toħroġ minn il-President, u xek?
Il-commission toħroġ minn il-President ta' Malta, that's right. And,
U x'differenza hemm bejn non-commissioned officer u commissioned officer mbagħad?
Mela, a commissioned officer is somebody who is directly representative to His Excellency or Her Excellency, when we have a female president, the president. In other words, he bears or she bears the commission from the president. A non-commissioned officer or a warrant officer, the warrant in our case in Malta comes out from the office of the Prime Minister. And therefore, for example, I'm a warrant officer. In respect to my warrant, ħaniprofa nfema b'tali mod illi per eżempju, an officer, jekk ikun għaddej officer, I would have to salute. It is custom and tradition to salute that officer. I am saluting the President's commission. In respect to me, if I'm walking by and another rank sees me, he does not salute. But he or she has to come to attention because I carry the warrant. And therefore that's the difference. So you have a sergeant who is a non-commissioned officer and a staff sergeant and a staff sergeant. They're non-commissioned officers. But għandek bombardier, per esempio, junior non-commissioned officer, and lance bombardier, junior non-commissioned officer. They haven't got the commission, but they are officers. In other words, they are authorities within the institution itself.
U naraw ħafna, l-AFM u għet nara l-bastun emmek, għandek il-bastun u koll, il-kejn. Naraw ħafna l-AFM fil-ċeremonjal. U naraw diversi parati differenti u meta jieġu n-nies minn barra minn Malta, apparti. Il-ċeremonjal, apparti ovvjament li fi ħafna training u nixtieq hekk tispjega li daqsxejn xi jsir u ma jsirx. Fakkarni bħalissa ħafna memori. X'ikun qed jiġri fiċ-ċeremonjal? X'irrappreżenta ċ-ċeremonjal?
Mela, first and foremost, this is the cane. Jien suppost inġor il-paystick on ceremony. But in my everyday duty, I carry this. This is u inti taf. When you see a person walking by with a cane, you know that person has been through a lot to get the privilege and honor to carry the cane. You know, he's been put through one of the harshest and hardest courses ever.
Exactly.
You know exactly because you were put through the same course as I was put through as well. So I carry this as a symbol of discipline. With regards to ceremonial per se, ceremonial l-għunet għanna ħafna fil-sena, għandek l-Independence Day, Republic Day, Freedom Day. The armed forces shows its discipline and its esattezza and pays tribute to the highest authority of the land, which is the president of the country, the sovereignty. If you have somebody, a head of state, coming from abroad to pay a state visit to Malta, then you're going to have the armed forces pay ceremonial respect to that head of state. Issa fil-filmat li qed naraw dan huwa trooping the presidential colour. Saret l-ewwel darba after, if I'm not mistaken, about 100 years, fit 2015. I stand to be corrected on the date, forgive me. 2015 saret l-ewwel darba fuq Piazza San George, trooping the colour in its broadest and fullest composition. And it was the first time in 100 years. The last time it was done, performed on Piazza San George, was in 1898, if I'm not mistaken. And we performed the whole sequence of trooping the colour with less personnel, ovvjament. L-Ingliżi għamlu għandhom ħafna iktar personnel. Pero it is the same format as the Trooping the Colour. Trooping the Colour hija xi ħaġa li jsir fil-Commonwealth countries. Malta is a Commonwealth country at the end of the day. And what happens is the Trooping the Colour is a traditional ceremony fej għawekka ħanoħroġ biex nati il-colour lil-ensign, lil-officer, and it's the only time I can draw my sword.
Okay.
Commissioned officers, when on parade, use their sword. This is the only time where Commander Armed Forces bestows upon me the honor to draw the sword. I take over the presidential colour. It is held by a senior non-commissioned officer to show innovation and trust. And here it is being handed over to the commissioned officer, who is generally a lieutenant. And
Meta qed naraw sejrek biex xabla tissellem
il-color, that's right. That's right.
U kollox bi preċiżjoni dejjem kollox.
Yes. Għawek indumu, per eżempju, l-Ingliżi jidumu xi 3 xhur, 4 xhur. Unfortunately, due to limited resources and what have you, mhux dejjem ikolli 3 xhur, ġieli ikolli 3 ġimgħat. I depend on people like yourself.
Għax daw in-nies iridu jeqpaw għaddejjem bix-xogħol normali u mbagħad iridu jmorru reħelsi l-apparti.
Per eżempju, nies li jaħdmu l-Air Wing, nies li jaħdmu l-Maritime Squadron, il-First, il-Fourth, il-Third Regiment. So they've all got their job, but they have to come down to Law Barracks and be trained. And ġili jkolli 3 ġimgħat biss. U meta ngħidu 3 ġimgħat, per eżempju, mis-7 ta' filgħodu sal-ofsinhar, sas-sija. You know, and so it's very, 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 very hard.
U training ukoll f'daw iż-żminijiet tkun hemm-xemx anke bl-uniformi daqsxejn antipatka lejja tan-nies.
Għal-ħares ma jkunux drill instructors, nies li kontinti.
Jiena vera ġeddid li memorja, nara daw il-firmati vera jġeddu. Ejja jibsa, però mbagħad kif tara riżultat fl-aħħar mill-aħħar jagħti hemmhekk huwa xi ħaġa kbira.
Meta jkollok l-ambaxxatur pereżempju Ingliż li jiġi fuqek wara u jgħidlek wow, that was better than what we did last July, pereżempju, dik kudos għalija, you know.
Eżatti. U hawnhekk x'qed jiġri, eżatti?
Hawnhekk qed isir il-March past, we are paying salute and honor to Her Excellency in this particular parade. The President of Malta, by formings, a very, 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 very intricate movement, a very intricate march past, fej everybody looks up to their right and salutes the President. Fl-aħħar mill-aħħar, il-presidential color huwa il-bandiera Maltija, il-bandiera nazzjonali. Bl-emblema tal-Forzi Armati ta' Malta superimposed fuqha fin-nofs u bil-kliem Forzi Armati. That was handed to us in 1988 by the president then, acting president, Paul Schwireb, fej it symbolizes the loyalty the armed forces of Malta has to its nation, to its people. And dik il-bandiera, dik il-color, sorry, by parading around it and marching with it through the ranks of the soldiers' ranks, we are symbolizing, or rather showing our loyalty, our extreme loyalty to the nation, to the president, to the people of Malta.
U meta naraw l-isparar, xi rappreżenta għax naraw ħafna mbagħad mitfali li morru jiġbru around.
Il-fedishwa, the fire of joy, the fire of joy. It's traditionally it goes back to Queen Elizabeth, the 12th century, if I'm not mistaken. Soldiers show their joy by letting off three rounds and in salute and in enjoy. Alek, it has a French designation.
Mela
Feu de joie.
l-Afganistani u hekk inkollu happy.
They're
Għax
very,
trigger
yes,
happy.
yeah, aħna namluha bil-blanks. Bil-blank cartridges, they do it with real rounds. So,
U apparti minn hekk issa mela l-abdejna biċ-ċerimonjal, għandna video ieħor. U dej kienet saret il-belt, kien hemm id-drill team ukoll, kien hemm il-banda tal-AFM li dejjem
parti minna.
kont parti
That's
minna
right.
hija.
That's right.
U
There they
hawnhekk
are.
toħroġ. U min xiex bdiet dik l-idea li jiena għad-drill team?
Li jena at drill team, that goes back to I do believe, the 90s, late 90s. The drill team are the elite drill ceremonial members. Daw kolla jaħdmu in various regiments within the AFM. This is a secondary role. Fej huma volunteers and they volunteer to join this particular drill team. They're the elite fej jidħol drill and ceremonial. And it comes from the tradition of showing the immense and intricate disciplines that a soldier can show in arms drill and foot drill. And it just shows that their display is an incorporation of everything that we stand for. And it's a display.
U għandek ħaġa oħra, xina niftakar anka speċjalment fej kienu jkunu rehearsals, eżempju, tiftakar ħafna numri, eżempju, kif ħaċċaqla ir-raj filma ċertu numru, ġifiri, it takes time. U apparti minn hekk, jekk forsi dak il-ħin, għax ovvjament kif qed ngħidu, mux kulħadd perfett, jaf dak il-ħin, toħroġlok mossa li jiġru narawa kwalunkwe armi ġifiri. Tittara kif ħat irranġa u tibqa' tiftakar il-numri ġo moħħok, ara konna wasadna ġifiri fija xogħol ukoll.
The stress that goes with it as well.
L-istress, il-professjonalità, mbagħad tidħol professjonalità kbira biex terġa' taġastja, ġifiri fih ħafna. U hawnhekk qed naraw oħra.
L-AFM band, il-AFM band għandna wieħed mill-aqwa banet militari illi għaw fl-Europa. And mux qed ngħidha jiena parti mill-AFM, imma it has been said to us on various occasions.
Kienu marru l-military tattoo wkoll jirrappreżentaw
il-Malta. L-Edinburgh tattoo, they did a spectacular display. They are professionals. They're focused on that. Għawek qed jagħmlu tip ta' diskalli f'tattoo illi it shows their versatility. Ovvjament, l-AFM band, their parent band is the Royal Malta Artillery Band. And so they have a variety of traditions and customs as well.
U għet naraw ċertu sfin u koll, ġifiri,
Eżattament,
għet id-daħħal ċertu nostalġija u koll,
Yes.
ġifiri, u nissuġġerixxu l-nis li jekk jixtiequ jaraw l-AFM,
Ekku.
apparti li naraw f'ċerimonja meta jiġi xaħattu hekk, hawnhekk tkun
Il-military
letteralment
tattoo,
differenti, qegħdin naraw l-armata b'mod vera partikolari.
Kellu bżonn illi thankfully and thank goodness, this situation where COVID-19 is concerned, we'll be able to get back out there and,
Sabi, ħafna.
yeah. Last year, unfortunately, it was cancelled. We had everything prepared, but better safe than sorry in that respect, though. Pero a wonderful, wonderful band. Li daw l-heroes tiegħi. They accompany us and jatuna dak l-spirtu.
Eżatti. Bħal film minar mużika minn teatra xej, l-istess hawnhekk.
Exactly.
U hawnhekk li kien sar l-MFCC fejn hemm il-band tal-AFM u qiegħda tippreżenta issa li-drill team biex jagħmel ix-xogħol tiegħu.
U drill team partikolarment, I mean, to find those young men and women to put themselves through, again, tgħidli drill, yes, to put yourself through grueling and demanding training to come up with such an exact drill display requires sacrifice and struggle and You know, they're the elite of fejn jidħol iċ-ċeremonjal fil-Forzi Armati ta' Malta.
Daw palissa kollha ġew magħhom sejn 1, 2.
True. That's right, that's right.
U titiżżomm mal-banda, ġifieri.
Jien kont fil-pubbliku għawek, qed narhom. I was never in a drill team myself.
Veru?
Għandi dispjaċir kbir illi x'ismu.
Dik kienet partikolari għax niftakar konna sparajna u n-nies vera ma stennewiex u nħażdu. U inti għandek dawk in-nies kollha il-pressure ta' nies kulħadd qed iħares lejk tipprova vera ma tiżbaljax.
Let's go. U dak huwa l-RSM, ex-RSM Mavi Kabela naħseb.
Eżatti hu.
Very good friend of mine.
X'imkien hemm Bonnici wkoll? Sur Bonnici.
Lovely. It's very good. I hope this COVID thing settles down. They'll be able to because they're roaring to go as well. Jiġifieri jixtiequ.
U l-militri tagħtu f'liema żmien tiġi eżatti?
October. Mostly in Octobers, yeah.
Ġifieri forsi jekk alla jriddi tal-COVID, forsi issa jekk forsi f'Oktober terġa' ssir.
Eżatt. They really want to, They really want to.
Ja sabiħa fis-sens anke n-nies ikunu qegħdin jistennew kważi avveniment li jgħidu isma' ara f'Ottubru mela ħanibbukjaw biex
It's always a packed stadium.
Eżatt. U semmejna l-cadetship. Ovvjament isir ir-rekrutaċċjaw Malta. U in-nies jgħaddu minn ħafna minn esperjenza kompletament kważi out of this world. Għandek il-ħajja normali ta' kuljum, f'daqqa waħda inti ħajtek bdiet paġna ġdida. X'jiġri eżatti fir-rekrutaġġ?
So basically you have two types of recruitment. You have the other rank recruitment, basic training, or għandek a recruitment for officer cadets. But both are aimed at changing the mindset of whoever's applying, the candidate, into whatever he or she has chosen in respect to the officer cadet. The mind changing that civilian mentality, that civilian upbringing into an officer's mind frame and characteristic. And it's the same with the other ranks. Usually dismantling the mind frame of a civilian and building, I won't say changing, building that individual up into a soldier. Now that takes a process, and the process is basically focused on drill, which obviously focuses on obedience and alertness and discipline, weapon training, map reading. You have a number of modules that you have to undergo. First aid, command and leadership, crisis management, personnel management, defense writing. You have all these modules which you have to undergo. And having said that, we do things very differently from the way they used to do them in the 70s or in the 60s. And nowadays you have different methods and different approaches to cater for what we obviously are faced with, the product of society. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard because not everybody can understand the where the process is going.
Ma jkunux lesti, u sfortunatament għaw tendenza vera sfortunata li ħafna minn nies jaħsbu li ħajitlu soldat jagħmel 25 sena u daqshekk. Meta fil-verità kif jitlu hemmhekk jindunaw illi mhux għal 25 sena tħalt hawnhekk.
Nowadays these past 6 years, I do believe, we've introduced a number of approaches in order to prepare personnel, our civilians, to what they can expect. Per esempio, meta jiġu għall-interview, we give them an insight. We get them on the parade ground and we tell them this is what you'll be faced with, you'll encounter. And we've come up with diverse methods which cater for society's product, and at the same time not at the cost of the final product. We need to produce disciplined soldiers, soldiers who are prepared to go beyond what normal civilians encounter, and you have to ensure that the process reaches its objective. Jekk jien għandi żgħażagħ jew nies li huma mdorrijin li pereżempju their parents do or everything for them, you know, and perhaps their parents don't correct them as firmly as they should correct them. You have to come up with a system that does not literally waste that individual's talent and motivation, yet still comes up with a system where the final product is what we were aiming for.
Kważi sekk ma nafx forsi fi żmien ma kienx teżisti di, però huwa konċett vera sabiħ. Kważi sa isma' jekk dan mhuwiex lest, mela isma' ħanippruvaw individwu ieħor ħanaraw jekk hux tajjeb għal dax-xogħol fl-aħħar mill-aħħar. Għax kważi ġieli jkun hemm li isma' dan di applika u forsi intażel u l-ejm tiegħu li jagħmel 25 sena servizzu daqshekk, da kważi isma' orejtu xem jaf li ma joċċali fis-sens għax raxxesilhem, isma' mela dak war tfajtu f'ġemp ħanejtek u daħalt persuna li veru jixtieq da xogħol.
We have only recently, last couple of years, if I'm not mistaken, come up with this particular system. Fej inġibu n-nies hemmhekk, they do their interview in front of a board, and they're introduced to what they can what they're going to meet. And an individual can take, per eżempju, ġi wieħed fuq għalli jinsejjer lemta. Għetlu xġara. Għalli ma rridx dal-ajjat. Għetlu ma ġiex jgħajjat fuċek u ek, per eżempju, we have policies nowadays in the 70s and early 80s and in the 90s in my day, you can go up to a person only a couple of centimeters away from his face and shout. Illum il-ġurnata għandna policies li you can't do that. Every army has changed certain approaches. Għetlu ma ġiex jgħajjat fuċek, imma għalli le ma dak lajjat storbi fuq il-parade ground, għalli kon se naqbad intieħjen. Għetlu le. But that does show the individual that maybe he's not, he or she, exactly.
Għafna minn nies li huwa xogħol, però huwa karriera fil-verità. Iktar milli huwa xogħol huwa karriera. Li dan għandek ħajtek hemmhekk inti tiddedika ħajtek għal ħaddieħor. Li lest tmut għal ħaddieħor fil-verità.
Għandek parti fil-proċess fej trid tagħmel 2 weeks living in, a period living in the barracks. Ovvjament il-rekrutaġġ idum 4 xhur. Għandek l-initial stage, unbat għandek il-living in stage, il-period. Kelli wieħed ġi fuq darba rani għaddej, għalli nistan kelmek ser. Għetlu għen, xera. Għalli ħanitlaq taħarrit namel il-karti. Għetlu why? Għetlu, it's only 2 weeks, you're in the barracks, blah, blah, blah. You know, you try and understand what the person is what is bothering.
Ġidu nifmu li da jkun hemm il-pressure ukoll għandhom pressure kbir.
Eżatt. Welfare is one of my main tasks as well. U għalli għax qed jieħdu li l-mobile. U ma nistax naċċessja Facebook. Għetlu erġaj dieli għalli għax aħna, when they start the living in phase, they take their mobiles and they don't give them the mobile until a certain time. Immaġna ħatkun in the field, you're not going to play around with Facebook.
Ġiri kollhom punishment ħanejdek li jistaw jizaw il-mobile ukoll.
Eżattament. And that's where order and discipline comes in.
Eżatti.
U għalli jena li ma nistax nidħol fi Facebook. Għalli Mari, etlu, come on. Surely. I was literally my mouth dropped to the ground. You know, this guy was literally addicted so much to Facebook that he was ready to give in his career. Now, I tried to educate and speak to the individual, and obviously every means and measures were made in order to ensure that the individual knew exactly what he was doing. But it's something that you do encounter. And
xi ħaġa li
It's a bit
impressjonanti.
discombobulated.
Kważi social media saret xi ħaġa wisq parti. Issa dak kif qed ngħidu jekk soldat ikun on the field jew hekk ikun fuq il-baħar da ma jkollux aċċess għal mobile.
Palissa ħafna nies li huma friends miegħi fuq Facebook probably qed jitkellmu jkollu jipposti.
Però hemmhekk qed ngħidu fi żmien ir-rekrutaġġ, żmien ir-rekrutaġġ huwa żmien illi jekk ma tibbildjax id-disciplina minn hemmhekk imbagħad tkun għax-xaqta bil-Malti għax ikun daħal mingħajr id-disciplina jkunu qegħdin jitolbu l-AFM fl-aħħar.
Mbagħad għandek aspett ieħor li għandek l-AFM, għandek karriera 25-year career, għandek career progression, the opportunity to progress. Jien bdejt bħala gunner. I became a lance bombardier after 8 years or 9 years. Bombardier, sergeant, staff sergeant, warrant officer class 2, warrant officer class 1, warrant officer class 1 RSM, finally warrant officer class 1 GSM. So you have a career progression. Not, unfortunately, not everybody can reach warrant officer class 1 because there are limitations in certain aspects. But the career progression nowadays, in my day, it was really, really hard. In my day, in the 90s, I joined in 1988, if I'm not mistaken, 1988. In my day, the promotion system was very, 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 very difficult. Nowadays, more people are being placed into cadre courses where they have the opportunities and vacancies to advance. And I believe, this isn't politics or anything, but I believe that nowadays there are more avenues open to career progression.
Semmejt il-politika. Jina wkoll għax ġieli tisma' sa għajdu tissekkux vera jekk le ma rridx nidħol ġo fiha, però jekk daw in-nies irnexxielhom jirranġaw b'xi mod b'xi ministru jew whatever, jiena ngħidilhom idħol bil-ħila tiegħek. Ħallik, għax ħafna mid-drabi jew forsi jgħidu li rranġalhom xi ħadd u daw l-għajdu tiġifieri. Isma.
One thing I can dispel on that, and this goes back to
il-politika taffettwa kulħadd fis-soċjetà.
You've still got to do 4 months of basic training, and if you can survive those 4 months of basic training, and we both know how hard it is, and everything, in that respect, you know, but if only. I would like to steer away from the political politics.
Għaw Malta u ma xaġa li taffetwa wis, ġifiri jena daw n-nis li jaħsbu li ħajprova jidħol mod politiku, isma, daw l-4 xhur xorta t-tamelhom, ġifiri isma, għamel hiltek, prova, ibda trejnja minn qabel, da mux ġej rekrutaġġ u mbagħad ħanibda nitrejnja, le, ibda trejnja minn qabel, prepara ruħek, ara xinu ara videos.
There is a rigorous selection process.
X'tinkludi l-ġurnata ser ta' rekruta?
Well, recruit starts off early in the morning, and early in the morning you've got to do physical training. Now, obviously, the physical trainer's first objective is to build gradually up and get them ready for what we call the Army Physical Fitness Test, which is held every 6 months. So they start off physical training.
Ġifieri s-soldati kull 6 xhur xorta mhux rekrutaġġ biss, jibqa' tul il-karriera kollha jibqgħu jagħmlu dat test.
Yes, every 6 months you have an APFT, and you know, if you don't pass your APFT, there are consequences in respect to obviously an individual. If an individual doesn't pass the APFT, then that individual is placed into remedial. Can remedial train in order to do the next session.
Sorry, skużani ħanwafqek sir, għax hawn ħafna tendenza li jaraw pereżempju isma' forsi għax daqsxejn soldat fih tifel jew hekk, Jiena nixtieq ngħidilhom u nixtieq ngħaddi dan il-messaġġ li l-ewwel nies da ma tafx saħħtu forsi
I know rather large people
Ġifieri da
who are
l-ewwel
very-
nies jista' jkun vera b'saħħtu u materializzax. Jista' jkun inqalalu xi ħaġa b'saħħtu u bil-fors forsi kellha tiżdied il-weight ġifieri.
Eżattament,
Apparti minn hekk semmejt section soħra li dan il-persuna jista' jkun ta' acid kbira għall-armata ġifieri, però xorta jrid jagħmel dat-testijiet li qed tissemmi.
Oh yes. And if he doesn't, or if she doesn't, there are. Ma nħobbx nsemmi l-kelma consequence, but there are consequences of such in failure, which to a certain extent does provide because. Okay, you motivate your soldiers as much as you can, and you expect them to have the initiative to do everything in their own ability. But then you have, it's like society in a whole. Not everybody in society is perfect. I mean, last time I saw a guy driving up a one-way. And there was a consequence to that, a stapil warden. You know what I mean? So you have to have consequences, and you have to have a system. And għawek nerġu niġi għalfej xħallew il-British meta telqu. An Armed Forces Act that ensures order, and non-compliance to that order comes at a cost. And there is an award if you do not follow those particular orders. Now, where APFT is concerned, if you fail your APFT, the army gives due process to remedial. Forsi kellek persuna li kellu injury u ma setax jipperformja l-APFT, jew forsi persuna kien fuq ċertu operations jew exercises illi couldn't do the APFT. So we're always promoting the fact that although you fail in your first APFT, there is a remedial. Now, if the individual does not reach the standard required of him or her, and it's not just on APFT, it's in everything. Discipline nowadays, different from my day, is progressive. In other words, the armed forces will do everything in order to guide you, in order to reach the value and the standard required, where discipline, where personal behavior is concerned. But if not, then there are obviously consequences. So, yeah, again, one of my friends is, when I was at the helicopter rescue section, was a very big man, but I couldn't outrun him. He was a really fast runner and one of the best swimmers on the island. So never judge a person from one's stature. But PT isn't the only emphasis. You also have the aspect of weapon training. We have a number of short weapons, the Heckler and Koch, the Beretta, the AK, and so soldiers are given basic weapon training and specialize afterwards in such weapon training, and they then progress on to infantry tactics and drill. So the whole day is rather hectic, very hectic. And that is the process. That is the process in changing an individual from a civilian into a soldier. Having said that, one of my jobs is to go around and ensure, obviously, from Commander Armed Forces of Malta's directives and policies, to ensure that there is no victimization, that there is no harassment, that there is no bullying. Our instructors are trained specifically in order to cater for certain aspects. Fil-passat, unfortunately, again, there's when somebody would be mistaken, Seeing you, for example, on the parade ground, inti għawek forsi tista' you can share a bit more on it. Seeing you shouting at somebody, giving them push-ups on the parade ground. If I were a civilian, I'd say, you're a bully. You're bullying that guy.
ħafna minn nies hekk jaħdmu.
I mean, seeing you shouting at the individual, get up, get
U
run
dik
around.
lajta partikolari,
U dik lajta partikolari, xin tagħmel? You're going to give up, ejja. People are going to say you're bullying. But it's not. It isn't. Pero there's a fine line that distinguishes bullying to destroy somebody or what we do in order to build a character.
Ma tagħmilix b'mod li tajjar, tagħmilha b'mod illi jisma' b'mod militari illi kważi iktar qed tiċċellenġjah biex ikompli. Min forsi jaqtalek daqsxejn qalbu anke karattri huma differenti, ġifieri mhux kulħadd huwa l-istess. Aw min forsi dak lajjat iħossu iktar ġewwa, minnu iktar sensittiv, aw minnu iktar forsi għala biebu, aw minnu iktar jinnaf moħħu hemm, aw min forsi moħħu jaħrablu.
Tiftakru x-xibiju?
Ejwa.
I remember my drill course. Twila ejja,
kien differenti. U ħafna mill-konċett baqa pala valuri baqa l-istess, pero l-lum ovvjament sirna iktar inklusivi, sirna nifmu daqxejn iktar l-individwi, l-lum qed nitalmu anka nis forsi xini OCD, xini qed nitalmu ħafna affarijiet differenti, ġifieri daw titprova tifhem u kuljum dejjem l-armi qiegħda tapdejti għal daw l-affarijiet, ġifieri dejjem qed titgħallem fl-istess ħin l-armi stess minn daw l-affarijiet.
U iktar, it leads me to again what you said before, il-foundation tal-AFM fuq xini bbażata. What are we built on? And this is where I said about the structure and the organization of what the AFM found and took and adopted for its own. We have at least 7 standards, values and standards, illi we use as a direction, as our ultimate goal, which defines us ultimately as a professional force. And what are those 7 values and standards? Għandek discipline, loyalty, integrity, respect. Għandek daw il-valuri, honor, courage, the standard you're going to use where law is concerned, where principles are concerned. Western, you could say Western, Christian values and standards, or rather I'll correct myself. I'd rather use the moral standards and values that are very important to every single one of us.
Hemm nies ta' reliġjon differenti semmejna reliġjon. Hemm nies ta' reliġjon differenti fl-armata.
I do believe so, yes. And yes, we why not? I mean, I wouldn't dare, not of fear of any particular consequence, but I wouldn't dare myself as an individual and as a person who has been brought up on these standards and value, ask anybody their particular religion or schismo. I wouldn't. I spent my life
rescuing għax ħafna minn nies jaħsbu li forsi jkun hemm xi barrier, però fil-verità issalvaw ħafna minn nies issa irrelevanti l-kulur, ir-reliġjon. Forsi veru jinqalgħu ċertu affarijiet u forsi f'Malta. Sfortunatament kien inqala dak l-aċċident, però ma nistgħux imbagħad
Jena pala persuna illi inni 33 sena fl-armata, I've winged down on patrol boats, I've winged down, I've jumped into the seas, I've worked side by side with soldiers. I have never, ever found a soldier that either did not give his or her utmost in those situations, and I'm proud. It's flabbergasting to have this experience, to see. It's not about me. It's about, especially now, in these 6 years as Garrison Sergeant Major, I see other people working and doing their best to achieve something, to achieve a better standard, officers, other ranks, you know.
Inti lesti ta' ħajtek għal ħaddieħor letteralment.
U tara kuljum in everything they do. You know, if they're training recruits for a regiment, if they're doing AFM band, drill team, personnel in Charlie Company, personnel in airport security, personnel at maritime, air wing. You see personnel administrators in HQAFM, logistics, records, finance, LEGAD. They're all actually focused. I am literally giving a personal experience. They are literally focused on ensuring that what we stand for is being kept. You always find the odd apple here and there. Illi nothing is perfect, but I say illi
ma tistax għax forsi nqalaw ċertu ċirkostanzi jew forsi kien hemm xi ċertu individwi li forsi provaw li u anke sfortunatament il-medja wkoll ġifieri nagħti tort ukoll il-medja wkoll ġifieri ix-xogħol kollu li jsir minn dawn in-nies ma jistax jitħammeġ ħabba persuna jew individwu wieħed. Ġifieri għandek komunità kbira, għandek nies, għandek effort kbir li jsir, però mbagħad ma tistax ħabba ċirkustanza jew xi ħaġa.
No. Of course.
Sfortunatament tispiċċa jsejħu l-AFM kollha jew il-pulizija kollha meta
eżattament. No, you can't. I think fl-aħħar mill-aħħar you have a broader perspective, a broader aspect, and way too much of a good reputation, and which is built on producing that will never sway our particular objective in that respect.
U kemm isiru rekrutaġġi fis-sena?
At least two. Obviously, you out of 100 applicants, for example, you get 80 who actually reach the end. You always have a percentage that give off that might not feel ready to partake the recruitment. Sometimes we see them the following recruitment or the following year. They give it another try. Naf wieħed li provaħ darbtej, and nowadays he's stable. He's fantastic in the army, and he failed the first one because he wanted to give up after a couple of weeks, and then retried the second one, and now has a great, job in the army.
Għat m'għandhom jaqtaw qalbhom in-nies.
No.
U min fejn jistgħu jsibu l-applikazzjonijiet biex jitlu fl-army?
Well, ovvjament, one follows our Facebook page. We've got a lovely Facebook page, the AFM Facebook page.
Waqqa dawk il-videos li rajna kienu mill-paġna tal-AFM, ġifieri min irid jinteressa ruħu li jidħol u jiċċekkja.
Exactly. The government gazette it promulgates that particular information, but basically twice a year we have a basic training going on.
Sir, grazzi ħafna. Nixtieq inselli għal dawk kemm ir-rekruti li kelli, l-ex-colleagues kollha tiegħi, jiġifieri għax naf li jagħmlu xogħol kbir ħafna, jiġifieri ser inti tagħmel xogħol kbir ħafna u niftakrek tiġi l-inspections tiċċekkjana prodott minn tiegħek jiena, jiġifieri niftakar
I couldn't be more prouder.
Thank you, sir. U anke kif qedlek panħares lejk speċi bħala bniedem illi irnexxilek tibni li l-karattru, bnejt li l-karriera tiegħi. Vera forsi llum il-ġurnata ma tnix taħt l-AFM, però mort f'settur li jkoll fuq rescue, jiġifieri.
Proset. I'm proud of you in that respect.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done.
Nemmen illi għandna nħarsu lejn l-AFM b'mod illi flok xogħol huwa karriera, jiġifieri attaqta qalbek. Fittex, jekk trid informazzjoni saqsi l-AFM għandhom il-Facebook page, għandhom l-email, ġifieri, jekk forsi taraw l-Sur Roger Malvej li tistgħu tistaqsuh ukoll, ġifieri ma tiklux nies.
No, definitely.
Anzi, forsi fuq il-parade ground tisimgħu l-ajjat, però fil-verità hemm raġuni.
That's right.
Kull ħaġa li ssir fl-AFM u fl-istituzzjonijiet bħall-pulizija, civil protection, eċetera, isiru kollha biskop. Ġifieri jekk taraw ċertu affarijiet li forsi ma narawhomx normali ħanejtek, però hemm skop il-għala jsiru, ġifieri.
Eżatt.
Sir,
It's been a pleasure and I've been watching you. And it's fantastic. Proset tal-idea.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. U nixtieq li nsemma lil-ħna kemm issa tal-ex kollegi tiegħi wkoll, ġifieri u ċertu informazzjoni li forsi ħafna minn nies ma jafux u nixtieq li fil-podcast anke jekk ikollna ħafna interess fuq dal-programm. Jew min forsi jixtieq jibda l-karriera u jixtieq jara dal-video, ġifieri tistgħu isibuh fuq Facebook u fuq YouTube u tistgħu tisimgħu fuq Spotify ukoll. U interessaw ruħkom, italmu, l-affarijiet anka jekk ma trix tidħol soldat, pero fil-verità tista' inti tifhem l-AFM ix-xogħol tagħha x'inhu fl-aħħar mill-aħħar, veru?
Ekku.
Grazzi ħafna, thank you sir, u nsellmilkom.
Il-Podkast. Issa ukoll fuq YouTube.